just to demonstrate again what I'm doing here with this tape. So this is another clamp, of course, with the cushion removed, and that hard 90-degree bend was here, and I cut that off. From that edge, from this edge here, I measure down 11/16 and I make a mark. That's going to be my bend line for this ear. At that point, I put on my tape. So you can see I've got the edge of the tape on that line, and I run the tape nice and parallel down the length of the clamp. And then down here, you can see the mark. So I'm going to transfer that mark onto my metal clamp. From that mark, I'll measure another 11/16, and that's going to be my cut line. So I'll cut it off at that mark. This mark here is my bend line. So I'll make a mark here for the bend. I'll measure down an additional 11/16, and then I'll cut it off. And then from this edge, I'll measure 5/16 for my hole. I've already done that on this edge. On the back side here, you can see the mark where I'm going to drill the hole. So let me try that again and see if this will fit on the other leg. Alrighty, well, this other one went together just like the other side. So absolutely no problems, and the fit I think is relatively exceptional. It fits really well. It's nice and snug. And I'm just very pleased with it. So in hindsight, if I had to do this again, I would do each and every one of these like that. I would just get a piece of tape, wrap the tape around the leg to get the diameter, and then lay that out on the clamp just like I've showed you. So as far as the clamps go, this is now done. The lighting in here is horrible. Another thing that I want to point out, you can see, maybe, I've got a nice gap between the stiffener and the leg itself all the way across. It varies a little bit. It's a little bit tighter up here at the top. It's probably like that's a healthy 1/16 of an inch gap. And then down here at this other end, it's probably maybe 3/32, maybe an eighth at the most. It's not an eighth, something less than an eighth. But still, there's a good gap. And let me check that on the other side. I wanted a gap. I don't want the stiffener itself to chatter and chafe and rattle around against the leg. So you can see here the gap. This gap is slightly bigger, but they're pretty uniform from side to side. So another thing to make note, I've only got 4 clamps on the entire stiffener. Is that appropriate? Is it enough? I don't know. I've noticed on the forums that people are using more like 6, 7 clamps. If I needed to, I can actually add clamps in between these locations. That would give me 7. But I'm going to try 4 just cause. And see what happens. So let's see, next up, I'm not really sure. Somehow I'm going to have to figure out how to get the stiffener perfectly centerline on the leg and perfectly parallel to the fuselage. That way I can get my gear leg fairing around it and get the fairing positioned correctly. But I'm not there quite yet. I have to reattach my brake line. I took all my brake line attachments off so that I can do these clamps with the stiffeners. So I have to redo those and then figure out, like I said, how to get the stiffener and the fairing in alignment with the rest of the fuselage. So that's coming up next. See how it goes. Talk to you guys later. A couple of more things that I just thought of. Hardware. So I am using stainless steel socket head button head socket screws. They're 10/32 screws, button head, and on the back side I'm using thin washers and these lock nuts. Now I may not keep these. These have been on and off a few times. I may switch over to the nylon lock nuts, but I'm not there yet. I may just keep these. I'm not really sure. I threw these on here because this is what I had handy in a 10/32 size. But that's it. I may also add a washer under the button head. The button head is a decent diameter, but a washer underneath here gives me a larger diameter, and it will help hold this ear flat against the aluminum. If your clamp is not the right size, these ears will start to pull away from the stiffener back here near the bend. If the clamp itself is too short, it will start to pull this off away from the stiffener. Just to help reinforce that a little bit, I'd like a head, if you will, with a larger diameter. I may stick a washer up underneath each of these. So I'll have a washer on both sides to help keep this tab nice and flat. And I think that might be it for now. So let me move on to some other things, and I'll talk to you guys later. Howdy, everyone. Going forward, I now have the clamps positioned where I want them. I've trimmed down the individual bolts a little bit because they were a little bit long, so I've trimmed those down. I added some extra Gorilla Tape where I thought I needed it, and I added the washer under each screw head like I talked about earlier. So now I've got a laser set up. I just acquired this laser, so I'm going to give it a shot. And what I've done is this. Like I've talked about before, I have the center line drawn on the floor directly underneath the airplane, the center line of the fuselage. At a 90-degree angle from there, I come out and I have these pieces of tape in various locations. I've got one down there now. And I've got inch marks on each of those. So now, what I've done, I've positioned a tripod directly over an inch mark, and I believe I've used 24 inches from the center line of the fuselage over at a 90-degree angle, 24 inches. And then I've come down using that laser. I put the laser on the 24-inch mark up here on this tape. And that also projected a line intersecting the gear leg, which is not important. I just wanted to make sure that I've got the 24-inch mark positioned center here, and then using the laser, I make sure that it's pointing at the 24-inch mark here. At that point, this particular laser has an adjustment on it where you can turn the beam at an angle. So after I've had it projected onto the leg, I've taken it and I've oriented it so that it's in line with the leg top to bottom. That, of course, projects a line on the leg itself. And then at that point, I've positioned and tightened my gear leg stiffener so that now the line, that laser line, is shown on the very leading, or actually this would be the trailing edge, but you get the idea. The beam is now projected perfectly along the very edge of the gear leg stiffener. I don't know if that shows now. I think it might. It gets washed out because of the light. If I turn the lights off, I don't think the camera would like that. But anyway, I've got the beam now projected right on the very edge of this gear leg stiffener. So now that one I believe to be set. And what I'm going to do now is put the gear leg fairing over it to do the same thing. I'll align the trailing edge of the fairing perfectly in alignment with the the laser. So once I get the gear leg fairing wrapped around it like this, I'll move it around all the way top and bottom so that the laser will lay perfectly along that trailing edge. So I'm going to do that next and see how that comes out. Now I'm going to get ready to attach the gear leg fairing to the gear leg. And again, I'm going to use this laser as a guide to get the trailing edge straight. A couple of things that I've almost forgotten about. You can see that I've added tape to hold the brake line. So I've gotten rid of my original wrapped around Gorilla tape, and I've went with some Tygon tubing, some clear Tygon tubing, gets split and wrapped around the brake line, and then I went back to my yellow tape just to hold it in place. I don't know how well this will hold up. We'll see. But I wanted the Tygon tubing over top of the metal clamp instead of next to it on the gear leg itself. So got some yellow tape. I've used this yellow electrical tape before. You've seen it in some of my other videos, and it seems to stick very well. So I'm going to try this, see how it works. But I want to get everything done so that when I put the wheel fairing on, it can stay until I get my intersection fairings completed. Once the intersection fairings are completed, then I can take this fairing off and on, and the intersection fairings will then be the alignment. So I just want to get everything complete. I want to get all the details done. I want to get everything trimmed, cleaned, and installed correctly before I do the intersection fairings. So now that I've got the brake line secure, I got the stiffener secure, I've got the gear leg prepped. I cleaned up that trailing edge of the gear leg, of the fairing. I've cleaned that up really nice. I've cut the spots up at the top a little bit bigger so I can get to my attachment clamp. I'll show you that in a second. And it's cleaned, so everything now is ready to go. Let me see if I can get this on and get it aligned.